Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Got another reptile highlight for you guys today, featuring a species that's related to a very familiar snake in the pet trade, but quite a bit less common, partly because they don't come in a huge number of different color mutations and morphs, but beautiful enough in their own right just as their natural color forms. These two, are Jacob and Leia, and they are Baird's Ratsnakes, Pantherophis bairdi. They are related to the corn snake, which is a very common pet in the trade, but found quite a bit further west. These guys are actually a species that I have tried to find in the wild, and unfortunately, as of the making of this video, I've failed so far, but I'm hoping for another chance later this year. These guys are native to Texas and northern Mexico. Primarily the Big Bend region and the central kind of Edwards Plateau area of Texas. They live in the rocky desert hill country out there. They are most closely related to the western rat snake, Pantherophis obsoletus, what people formerly referred to as the Texas rat snakes, no surprise, and will occasionally integrate with them at the very edges of their range where they meet, kind of around the San Antonio area. But these guys like the semi-vegetated rocky canyon areas of further west Texas, where they live in deep canyons, places with lots of cracks in the cliff faces and rock walls, places that they can hide. And their color, as you can see, is kind of made for blending in with that environment. Slaty grays and bright oranges of the sandstone and volcanic habitats out there. They are a little bit variable in the wild. These guys, of course, are pretty standard for the species. They've got that pewter slaty gray color with kind of 3 or 4 stripes, dark stripes that run down the body. And then underneath that, of course, those peaches and yellows and pinks and reds that show up. But they can vary a little bit. Some locations have these bright orange heads with entirely gray bodies. Others may have gray heads with yellow bodies, and that varies a lot, depending on where you find them. Especially as you go down into Mexico, it seems. A lot of localities, as you head south, tend to develop more of that kind of yellowish color with the gray heads. But they're an interesting example of what's known as ontogenic color change, wherein the babies have an entirely different look from the adults. When they hatch out, and I'll show you pictures of these guys here when I first got them, they actually start out as these just really drab, blotchy gray animals. And as they grow up, they lose those dark blotches that are on their backs, and that gray starts to fade out as they gain their oranges and their yellows. Now these guys are not a huge rat snake. They're actually pretty comparable in size to the corn snakes. No, you guys can't go over there. Stay over here with me, okay? They've just woken up from hibernation, so they're a little antsy and a little unused to handling because it's been a few months. But these guys average in the wild around 4 feet long. It varies a little bit from about 3.5 to, on occasion, they can push 5, sometimes even almost 6 feet long, but they are a little bit more slender than your average corn snake. These guys are mature at around 3.5 to 4 feet long right now. They could get a little bit bigger as they grow up. They're a few years old now. But they aren't huge. Like, they don't get the size of like their relatives, the western rat snakes, which can push 7 to almost 8 feet long sometimes. Instead, they remain kind of a more manageable size, like these guys here. And in their habitats out in West Texas, it's an environment where they don't truly experience like a winter hibernation dormancy period per se, because there are days all year round where they can be active down there when temperatures are in the 70s and 80s during the day and such. So They'll hunker down in the cracks and crevices where they hide during the day whenever it gets cool, and then they'll come out whenever it's warmer. Or, conversely, during the summer months, these guys become a lot more... during winter, they're mostly diurnal. They come out during those warm days and they run around. But during the summer, they become crepuscular to nocturnal animals, so they come out in the evening. Hello, what are you doing? Boop. They come out in the evenings and through the night to hunt. And naturally, these guys are hunting pretty much any small warm-blooded animals and occasionally lizards that they can find. So they really like rodents, of course. They will also occasionally climb up into trees or hunt even ground-nesting birds and such. They do take eggs on occasion. These guys haven't been convinced that they can eat eggs here in captivity, these two, but in the wild they certainly would occasionally take them. And they're really adept at climbing up those rock faces for going after lizards, going after the rodents that run along the edges of rock outcrops. They'll sit and find a place to set, maybe stick their head over, just like you can see Jacob is doing here, and now Leia coming up to see the camera. They'll sit with their head just over a rock ledge, wait for something to run by, and nab it. And of course, like other North American rat snakes, they are completely non-venomous constrictors. So they rely on their strength, on constriction, to take down their prey. A strong pressure that is applied by their coils, which doesn't suffocate the animal like most people think, but instead is a much quicker dispatch method. That pressure actually cuts off blood flow to the heart and brain, and so basically shuts the animal down within 30 seconds to a minute. So it's actually a very fast, very humane method of dispatching their prey. What are you two doing? So these guys really are not as common in captivity, partly because, again, like the relatives of the corn snakes, those guys have all sorts of different color mutations and such that they come in. Amelanistic, anerythristic, tessera, and all sorts of other things. These guys, the only real mutation, other than the localities, the different colors that they show up in the wild, the only really real mutation that is known is hypomelanistic. And these guys are actually heterozygous carriers for that gene, where it takes away all of this silver-black pigment and leaves them these bright, pale silver and orange-red animals. Honestly, from the photos that I've seen, I think I like how they look just as is better. And they can also be just a little bit more uppity in their attitude sometimes. You can see these guys, they're pretty used to me, and I know how to pick them up and hold them. And of course, when you're first picking them up, they'll vibrate their tails, make noise to say they're not really happy, but then they calm down once they're actually out. But they can occasionally be a little snappy, so they're not quite as common, possibly for that reason. But once you get them used to you and you're handling them frequently, they can be pretty calm, pretty relaxed animals, much like your average corn snake is. A little bit more skittish on occasion, so they don't like as much interaction, but they can still come out and hang for quite a while once they're used to you. Hello. So they actually do make a pretty decent pet because, again, they're similar size. So for setting them up, you get a cage that is preferably at minimum around 3 to 4 feet in length, and then give them at least a couple of feet in diameter or in width. And because these guys are rock climbers and semi-arboreal, it's great if you can provide them with a little bit of height as well. So again, the bigger the cage, the better, of course, because they will make use of their entire environment. Like these guys, if they were allowed to, they would use like a space the size of this greenhouse, and they'd be climbing all over the place in it. But a minimum of like 4 by 2 by at least 2 feet high, if not more, putting in rock ledges or lots of branches they can climb on, lots of hides for them to go into. One thing that they really like, actually, is old paper towel tubes, because it's just thin enough that they can stuff themselves inside and hide, but big enough that they're not going to get stuck in there and that makes for a really cozy, secure hiding place for them, especially if like one end is buried underneath the substrate somewhere, for them to feel like they're very comfortable and nice and well hidden. Hi. Now, because these are semi-desert Texas and Mexico animals, they can take pretty warm temperatures, but again, they like to live in canyons and vegetated areas, so they don't live in the hottest parts of the desert. And of course, they also aren't exposing themselves to the warmest parts of the season either. So when they're out and about, it's usually temperatures will range between 75 and about 85, maybe 90 degrees is usually what they like. So when setting up an environment in captivity for them, an ambient temperature of somewhere between 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit is good. If there's a slightly cooler area for them to retreat to as well, that's great as also. And then give them a warm basking zone that might be up to 90, 95 degrees Fahrenheit for them to choose to thermoregulate as they desire to. Where are you going? So gradients are always important for these guys. And because they are crepuscular animals and diurnal during the winter as well, they will, of course, if you can provide it, benefit from a little bit of UVB exposure or natural sunlight. People say it's not necessary, and certainly they can survive without it, but it does provide some benefits. You may see more natural basking behavior from them if you provide that sort of thing. And you might also see their colors brighten up and improve when you're able to give them that. Hello. Yes, where are you going? They don't have much concern for personal space. I am just another thing for them to climb on as far as they care. Now these guys, much like corn snakes also, are generally pretty reliable breeders as well if you're into trying that sort of thing. The males, of course, during the spring, once they warm up, they'll grab a couple of meals, and then their minds will turn towards mating. And so after a winter hibernation period, after they've been cooled down and they haven't been eating for a couple of months, when you start bringing the temperatures back up, that's when you give them their first couple of meals, and then the males will start searching, start traveling, becoming restless as they look for females. And the females will bulk up and ovulate at that time as well. So it's just a matter of, at that point, putting the two of them together, leaving them alone for a little while. Of course, checking in. You should never leave two snakes completely unattended. They are not social animals. This species is not particularly social. They aren't really cohab friendly animals. It's best if they have their own cages to live in, but you put them together to breed. The male will court the female, rubbing across her neck and back. Occasionally, they will even courtship bite. It can look kind of violent if you don't know what you're seeing, but it's perfectly normal for them. A little less common in rat snakes than something like the gopher snakes, but it still happens on occasion. And then when they mate, they'll tie together for a couple of hours before going their separate ways. The eggs are about 1.5 inches to almost 2 inches long or so, not huge, and incubate in a moist area. In captivity, you might use sphagnum moss or vermiculite or moistened perlite at roughly 82 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, usually for a couple of months before hatching out into those blotchy, gray, really drab-looking babies. And then over the next couple of years, of course, as they grow up, they lose those blotches. You can actually see the shadows in the video here of her original pattern inside the lines, but they lose the main black markings there as they grow up and gain their pretty colors. So that's about all I have for these guys right now, although certainly if there's something that I've missed or a question you'd like to ask about these guys, you can feel free to leave a comment down below the video here, and I can try to get back to you. Certainly an animal that is kind of overlooked in herpetoculture right now, especially overshadowed by their relatives, the corn snakes and the common rat snakes. but an absolutely beautiful, amazing species to work with if you get the chance to. But for now, though, again, if you have questions, leave those in the comments below. If you enjoy seeing educational videos like this, consider joining to support as a member at patreon.com/hcarlton. Members there get benefits back like early access to the videos that I release here, access to the monthly seed contest that I do because I work with all the plants here. I do give that for members. There's exclusive merch as well. And of course, if you don't want to sign up for a monthly thing, there's also a coffee account that you can donate to or buy merchandise at our Teespring shop, or plants and occasionally baby reptiles on the website at carltoncarnivores.com. All the links for these things, of course, will be in the video description below, so you don't have to memorize this stuff. If you can't support in a monetary way, though, simply giving attention to the channel here and other social media channels is really helpful as well. Liking, subscribing. No, you cannot have that, miss. You can't go over there. They're getting rowdy and running away. But liking, subscribing, leaving comments. Make sure when you subscribe to click on the black bell so that you don't miss any updates that are coming up. Hi, yes, that's not for you. And of course, if you want to see more photos, videos, little tidbits and such, I'm always posting on the other social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Carlton Carnivores. You may see these guys, you may see some of the other reptiles that we work with as well. But until next time, this is Leia, and Jacob, wherever he's hidden off to, and this is Carlton Carnivores.